Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're headed to Jamaica, where figuring who's your daddy is more than just a saying. Like, it's actually a really big deal there.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
So we're going to dig into why this island nation leads.
Jamaica, as we know it, has a very unique existence. No country can top having approximately 85% of children being born out of wedlock, over 50% not having a registered father, and 70% of those tested not being the father.
They explore how genetics and family and identity all kind of intersect.
Yeah, it's a great podcast.
So get ready to learn some surprising stuff about how Jamaica approaches family history, in a totally unique way.
Definitely.
So let's jump right in. Paternity tests in Jamaica, they're super popular, right? But it's not just some trend, right? Yeah. What's really interesting is how deeply it's all connected to Jamaican culture. Extended families are a huge part of life there. So figuring out who your father is, it's not just about curiosity. It's about understanding your place in this intricate family web.
Right. So it's way more than just oh, I wonder who my dad is.
Exactly.
Like tracing your family tree, but with, way higher stakes.
Yeah, and with a much more immediate impact on your life. Roots of Identity talks about how in Jamaica they have these gatherings after a death called Nine Night. And during these events, people actually discuss paternity and lineage pretty openly. It's a normal part of their tradition.
Wow, that's really something. It's like these tests are almost a cultural ritual.
Kind of, yeah.
So how does the science behind it all actually work? It's not like magic, is it?
Well, not magic, but pretty amazing. It all comes down to analyzing these little markers in your DNA called short tandem repeats. Think of them like a unique code in your genes, right?
Okay, yeah.
So scientists compare these codes between a child and the potential father, and by doing that, they can determine paternity with over 99.9% accuracy. It's pretty remarkable.
So it's kind of like those crime shows where they use DNA to solve cases, but for families.
Yeah, exactly.
But what makes Jamaica stand out globally in all this? I mean, is it just the culture, or is there more to it?
Well, culture is a big part of it for sure, but Jamaica also has a really strong system for genetic testing. Their labs are top-notch, and they've made these tests super affordable,
Right.
and accessible, which is huge for families who might not have the money to do this kind of thing elsewhere.
I see. So it's actually within reach for people.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. But, just thinking about it, if it were that easy and affordable for me to find out about my family history, I mean, wouldn't you be at least a little bit curious?
Oh, absolutely. And in Jamaica, that curiosity is totally normal. Remember, it's a society where knowing your family line is essential to understanding who you are and where you fit in.
Yeah, that's a good point. It sounds like they've made it okay to talk about these things openly, but I'm also kind of wondering about the emotional side of it all, what happens when these discoveries reveal secrets that people maybe weren't ready for?
Yeah.
That must be tough.
Yeah, that's a great question for part 2.
So I guess what I'm getting at is some people might find peace of mind with these tests, but for others, it could be a total shock. Imagine finding out you've got siblings you never knew about, or that, your family history is totally different from what you always thought.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those revelations can be pretty intense, right?
Yeah.
And it's really important to have support systems in place for people to, process all that.
It's those genealogy shows where they uncover all these family secrets. But in this case, it's not just entertainment. It's real life, with real consequences.
Oh, yeah.
So how is Jamaica dealing with, the potential downsides of all this genetic information being out there?
Well, what's really interesting about their approach is that they get that paternity testing isn't just a scientific thing. It's super personal and often means a whole shift in how families see themselves.
Okay.
They really stress the importance of open communication and family counseling, to help people work through whatever comes up from these discoveries.
That's pretty cool. It's they're trying to build a culture of support around this whole thing instead of just focusing on the science.
Right. Exactly. It's about recognizing the potential for disruption, but also emphasizing empathy and understanding, especially when people are dealing with these huge revelations.
Yeah, that makes sense. It kind of makes you wonder, how would this play out globally? What if everyone had this kind of access to genetic info?
That's a big question, right? Like, on the one hand, you could see it leading to a more accurate and detailed understanding of our family histories, maybe connecting with relatives we never even knew existed.
Right.
It could even, create a stronger sense of belonging and connection.
Right. It's almost like expanding the definition of what family even means.
Yeah, exactly. Like challenging those traditional ideas. But then on the other hand, there's also the risk of misuse. Imagine what could happen with privacy, inheritance disputes, or even like stigma based on your genes.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of like opening Pandora's box, right? Like
Yeah.
once this information is out there, who knows what people will do with it?
Right, exactly. That's why it's so important to talk about the ethics of all this, before it just becomes the norm everywhere.
So, I mean, Jamaica seems to be doing a good job handling this, but the rest of the world, like, we've got a lot to learn, right?
Absolutely. We're in uncharted territory here. Our whole understanding of family and identity and genetics is changing super fast.
It sounds like they're not just leading the way with DNA testing, but also with figuring out, like, the human side of it all.
Exactly. And that's what's so groundbreaking about their approach. It's not just about the science, but about, navigating the human side of things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this has definitely given me a lot to think about. What about you? What are some of your main takeaways from all this? For me, it's kind of wild how Jamaica's just made this whole paternity thing part of their culture. They're so open about talking about family and ancestry. It's like progressive, but also totally traditional at the same time.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like they've figured out how to mix the old with the new,
Yeah.
using science to answer these age-old questions about where you come from and who you're connected to.
Makes you think, like, what if other countries were more like that? Imagine if families everywhere could talk about this stuff so openly.
That would be something. And it might actually happen, as DNA testing gets cheaper and easier to get all over the world. We'll probably see more and more people having these conversations, even in cultures that, maybe aren't used to it.
But the thing is, are they going to be ready for it? Like, Jamaica has all these support systems in place to help people deal with the emotional side of things.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not enough to just give people the information. They need to have someone to talk to, someone to help them figure out what it all means.
It's like giving someone a powerful tool without a manual.
Yeah.
Could end up doing more harm than good.
Exactly. And that's where, looking at what Jamaica's done can be super helpful. They've shown that, it is possible to embrace all this new tech and still be sensitive to the fact that it can really shake things up for people.
So I guess as we wrap this up, what's the one big takeaway you hope people get from all this?
Well, I think the main thing is remembering that this isn't just about science. It's about people. Family's complicated, and these DNA tests, they can shine a light on things, but they can also make things, even messier.
Hmm.
So as more and more people start doing these tests, we got to be careful, approach it with empathy and be ready to rethink what we think we know about family.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. How do you think knowing more about your genes could change how you see your family, both now and, in the future? Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.